tales of horror, fun and crime, 10 of the strangest cemeteries around the world. Mentioning the word graves is usually associated in our minds with sadness, crying and a feeling of loss, but this does not prevent some graves around the world being out of the ordinary. And when they visit you may arouse ideas related to fun or philosophical thought or stories of crime and criminals. To the extent that some of them have become tourist attractions that are intended by tourists around the world. Have you ever imagined visiting a cemetery with a smile on your face? Then you should visit the Sapanta Cemetery in Romania, and if you want to think about engineering or you are a fan of mystery, visit the Giza pyramids in Egypt. We're one of the 7 wonders of the world, but if you are a fan of excitement and crime stories, you can visit Yekaterinburg in Russia. The most famous cemetery in Texas and terrifying to less numerous myths, almost all terrifying, are associated with the name of this cemetery located in the state of Texas, USA. As generations pass, stories of the existence of ghosts in the Stull Cemetery, and some assert that they listen to sounds they say are demons and ghosts. There are a huge number of stories associated with this cemetery, one of which says that one of the demons is buried in it, so this devil comes at least once a year to visit it. With the abundance of myths about this cemetery, some called it one of the 7 gates of hell. Pyramids. The monastery of Schwarz Planet placed the pyramids of Giza in Egypt at the top of the list of the strangest tombs in the world, adding that the name alone is sufficient and does not require further explanation. Underwater burial. The idea of establishing a cemetery at the bottom of the sea began to be the appropriate end place for people who loved the sea and were associated with it during their lives. And it was the first cemetery to implement this unconventional idea in Florida. The price of the cemetery is over $6,000. Outstanding caskets. The presence of coffins hanging on the mountains is one of the traditions that some Asian countries are famous for, such as the Philippines, Indonesia, and China. And it is based on the customs of some ethnicities in Asia. The oldest of these hanging coffins is found in China and is more than 3,750 years old. The first cemetery for dogs. Cimetière des Chiens, or Dog Cemetery, is a name known to people and visitors to the French capital, Paris, and it is believed to be the first animal cemetery in the world. This cemetery was opened in 1899, and was initially intended for burying dogs only, but it has transformed over time to the place of burial of many other pets and even fish. Visitors to this cemetery are encouraged to visit the most famous of the dogs buried there, the Rin-Tin-Tin dog, of German Shepherd, who participated in 26 of the films. The graves of the mafia leaders. In the 1990s, the Russian city of Yekaterinburg was known as the capital of organized crime in Russia, as the conflict raged between 2 mafia gangs. The remains of this conflict remain through the cemetery where the mafia dignitaries are buried. Something that visitors can easily notice through the expensive alabaster stones that decorate the cemetery. The funny thing is that the information written on some graves focuses on mentioning the criminal specialization of the deceased, such as his skill in dealing with the knife. Cemetery of Philosophy and Arithmetic. Mexican Xcaret Park combines charming nature with a philosophical and mathematical theme. The cemetery in the park is located on a high dome with 7 windows representing the days of the week, and around it are 365 cemeteries representing the days of the year. while the entrance to the cemetery is preceded by 52 steps of the stairs that represent the weeks of the year. Fun cemetery. Sadness and tears are most often associated with cemeteries, but the situation is different in Sapanta Cemetery in Romania, which is known as the Cemetery of Fun. And it has become a tourist attraction in the city. This cemetery is characterized by bright colors, as the idea began in 1935 when an artist chose a distinctive form of the cross that adorns each cemetery, and was keen to indicate the personality of the deceased, his function and his weaknesses in life, through cheerful drawings decorating his tomb. Cemetery of Prostitutes and the Poor. Crossbones Cemetery, one of London's oldest cemeteries, with a history dating back to the Middle Ages. The story of the cemetery dates back to the year 1608, when it was used to bury the women of their passions, as the Christian traditions of the time did not allow them to be buried in the usual cemeteries, and with time the cemetery turned into a place to bury the poor. To this day, the cemetery's wall is decorated with colored feathers and ribbons. Confrontation with death. This small church is considered one of the most important features of the region of Urbania in Italy, as the visitor faces death directly here through the 18 mummified bodies located behind the altar of the church.